All right, it is 10 a.m., so I want to go ahead and welcome our panelists. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to introduce Bonnie Jo Morrison. She is our school social worker and alumni. She's been working here at CSD, California School for the Deaf Fremont, for 15 years, and now she is our social worker. We really appreciate all the work that she does here and all the presentations she does on social emotional learning, abbreviated as SEL, as well as identity development. Today, she is here to share some information about how you can empower your deaf child. So thank you so much, Bonnie Jo, for joining us today. I will go and transition to Bonnie Jo in just a minute. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here because, as you may know, I cherish SEL, social emotional learning. Therefore, I wanted to take the opportunity to share some information today about SEL and identity development. Before we get started, I want to take the time to ask you all to think about how you define and measure your deaf child's success. What does success mean to you? Do you measure it through reading level, MAP scores, friends and who they are, job titles, degrees? What about salary? Well, I want to take the time to share my personal definition of success and what that looks like. The first point is happiness. Secondly, capability and independence, as well as satisfaction and contentment with oneself. Additionally, how your child views themselves and the world and how they handle everyday situations, such as conflicts, responsibilities, and so forth. Finally, how the relationships they have with themselves, family, and friends look like. And really, all these are part of the social emotional learning, such as empathy, self-esteem, decision-making. And I know that we tend to focus on academics. However, it's also important to focus on social emotional learning because it is just as important because it helps your deaf child navigate through life successfully. For example, there are those who thrive academically. However, their SEL skills need some work. Now, all of these traits are part of social emotional learning skills. I would like now to share some key findings that I've found related to social emotional development in deaf children. The first is that social emotional development promotes language skills, and language skills in turn support social emotional development. Secondly, direct communication with numerous adults and peers is important to learning and social emotional development. Thirdly, deaf and hard of hearing children show gains in self-esteem and self-confidence when they have friends who are also deaf or hard of hearing. Finally, after school, weekend, different programs with deaf and hard of hearing peers are excellent means to develop friendships and feelings of belonging. And finally, deaf and hard of hearing children are empowered when they are considered part of the overall diversity among students in their school here at CSD. And I will also explain more about the development of language and how that ties into social emotional learning. So social emotional learning really has 5 parts. Before, there were 4 parts. However, the 4th part has now been split into 2 different parts. And we'll start with self-awareness, which is recognizing one's emotions and values, as well as one's strengths and challenges. Next up is self-management. How do children manage emotions and behaviors to achieve their goals? Next is social awareness. This is all about showing understanding and empathy for others. And now we used to have social management, which is now 2 different parts, starting with relationship skills, which focuses on forming positive relationships with working teams and dealing effectively with conflict. The second part is responsible decision-making, which is all about making ethical, constructive choices about personal and social behaviors. Really, it's all about how your child navigates through the world. What I like to keep in mind about self-awareness, self-management is, well, for self-awareness specifically, it's all about I am. For self-management, it's all about I can. Social awareness focuses on I care. And social management deals with I will. And on the next slide, I will explain more specific examples about what it looks like generally for all children who are developing social emotional learning. And perhaps you can use this to measure and evaluate your child's social emotional learning thus far. For I am helpful, lovable, proud, good at counting numbers, capable, I am funny, I am worthy, I am great at swimming. I am seen, because oftentimes deaf and hard of hearing children are not recognized. However, here we recognize them and we know they're worthy and they are seen. We see them as a whole child that they are. Second is I can manage my emotions. I can manage my behavior. I can support others and I can share ideas and opinions. Thirdly, I care. I care about my future, my education, my environment, my well-being, my family, and so on. Fourthly, I will. I will embrace diversity. I will make good decisions, respect others, show empathy, do my best in school, and accept my mistakes and learn from my mistakes. And there's so many other social emotional learning skills here that you can see in your child. Now I'd like to transition more specifically to you and your child. Which social emotional learning competencies, oh, and feel free to add any of your responses in the chat, please. For the first question, which SEL competencies do you feel your child excels at? Now, which SEL competencies do you feel your child perhaps has the most difficulty with? Something that you've noticed as they themselves interact with others. What do you think is the most challenging for them? Additionally, how are you currently teaching SEL at home? Think about that a little bit, because here at CSD, we have a lot of SEL resources, but there's a lot of SEL opportunities also at home. Now you see this picture of the heart and the mind is one of my favorite pictures because it shows how, personally, my philosophy in working with students as a counselor, how the mind and heart coincide with each other and work together. Sometimes we have strong feelings of anger, but your mind says, no, no, no. your mind thinks logically. And in that moment, your heart and your mind are working together to get you through that situation. Really, mind and heart are one. Now I want to take the opportunity to chat about what SEL conversations may look like at home. Because we do have some SEL classes which you can learn and understand, but really there are so many opportunities of SEL learning at home and all throughout the world. Really, SEL is an all day, every day, 24/7, forever learning journey. So instead of denying a child's feelings, as you can see here, the student says, "This story is dumb." But the adult in the room responds, "No, it's very interesting." The child then says, "I hate reading." To which the adult responds, "No, you don't, you're a good reader." And the child then says it has too many words, to which the adult then denies, "No, you're being silly. The words are easy." And the student says, "It's too hard," to which the adult responds, "You're not even trying, you're just being lazy." It's You see, here is denial and not putting any feeling or thought into the response. On the other hand, you can see here a different example where the student says the story is dumb. But then the adult encourages conversation and says there's something about it you don't like. And then here in the third picture, the child says, "Well, I like the story we read, but the one about the horse and dog," to which the adult says, "Sounds as if you prefer books about animals." And then in the final slide, you can see here that the child shows an interest in books about dogs, to which the adult then responds that they will go to the library together and find something that they would like to read. It's the approach of trying to encourage discussion between you and your child and trying to relate with them. That's what the most important part about developing SEL skills is. Because really, that's all SEL skills are what is behind decision making and how your child navigates the world. So your child understands, why do I feel like this? And they can make the appropriate changes in order to self-advocate and to have autonomy. Rather than you managing every single decision, invite that conversation and invite their perspective. So this is just an example of what general SEL learning looks like. I know sometimes we feel tempted to interrupt the process and perhaps make the decision, but it's important to take the time to discuss with your child and listen to them and what they're thinking. It's rather than guess and make decisions for them. Now I'd like to touch a little bit on social emotional learning in a school environment, which can also be done similarly at home. Really, it's very important that everywhere in a child's life, there is social emotional learning, but here is what it looks like here at CSD in school. Here we have physical development and cognitive development. However, I will refrain from diving into that too much and will focus on social development and emotional learning. Social development deals with cooperation, negotiation, socialization, and rules and formation. Next, emotional development deals with empathy, impulse control, self-regulation, persistence, and the will to keep going, as well as resilience, self-confidence, and joy. So I want you to keep all these traits in mind for when you want to teach or develop SEL skills at home. And as parents, family, whoever you may be, it's important to support your child's social emotional learning and school, and focus also on academics, because really social development and academics coincide together. Just wanted to put that out there.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to empower your child. I've often seen that some families have strong signing skills, and that is amazing. But we also see that there's an emphasis on teaching ASL skills to your child. We do encourage learning ASL, but that is not the primary emphasis. You don't need signs to teach SEL. Maybe it's dependent on academic, or they don't have access to the information, but all of those people or adults in their life are making decisions for them rather than encouraging them to think about these discussions and having them talk about them with them. So as much as we can make language accessible to them is part of this, how we can empower our child. Maybe if we're going out to a restaurant, let them know or ask them what their meal could be or what they would potentially order. Maybe there's pictures on the menu, encourage them and take every opportunity you can to incite this conversation with them. If you're working at, or excuse me, if you're at home and if they aren't catching all the information on the TV, maybe this is an opportunity to use these SEL skills and ask them again about what they're missing. SEL is about incidental learning. Following this, we have encouraging our child to share their thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and being a part of the discussion. We also have expose your child to everyday discussions and situations. Often families have a discussion that maybe the child misses, but it's important to involve the child in what's happening and ask them about their opinion and their perspective, because potentially they have a different perspective, but it's important to involve them in the conversation and allow them to negotiate and become participants in the conversation. And it's really important that we do this. We've noticed a lot of students become more empowered when we give them this opportunity. It also allows them and encourages different opportunities for your child to practice SEL skills. You are the model, so it's, if you practice it, your child will follow you. Families do like to do redos. For example, doing something over again, do that activity over again. But if they become upset, maybe they can ask them to try again or use a different way to get through that conflict. That is one example of another SEL skill that you could use with your child. We are the model of SEL skills. So how we model the SEL skills, for example, if we're frustrated or irritated with something, if we lash out, our child is watching us and absorbing how we react. So we are the model of these SEL skills. We also have to give our child opportunities to negotiate and give them the time. Don't try to rush this conversation. Try to figure out and take the time to figure out what the challenge is for the child, whether that's, it's not my own way, it's not their own way. And it's not about my way or your way, it's about negotiating so we can both have this platform to discuss our opinions and our concerns. We also, for example, if this child wants to stay up late, we can negotiate that if you do stay up late, you'll be tired in the morning and maybe at school be harder to concentrate. That would be one kind of example where we can use an opportunity to negotiate so they can encourage an opportunity to think for themselves and make decisions for themselves. Finally, we really like to encourage involving our child in family discussions and in family decisions. If a family is going to visit another family, I've seen some students who aren't sure where exactly they're going and they're just arriving to the place. But this could be an opportunity where you could ask the child and involve them with, maybe we are going to go to a rest stop and go out to eat. We can ask them and involve them potentially what their ideas would be. These are some ways to keep in the forefront of our mind, not in the back of our mind, on how we can empower our child with SEL skills. We also have language's role for identity and social emotional development. I have a question. Is language enough for building one's self-identity and social emotional skills? Do you think language is enough? I would argue it is not. We've seen overall some childs have strong language skills, but struggle with social emotional skills. They haven't had those positive exposures to language or experiences to have that self-identity. We also have, what do you think your child needs to have in order to develop strong SES skills? Whether that's academic or with their peers or with adults or with family, we like to encourage SEL skills or SES skills in all of these areas. If you think of another, if you want to comment, you can add it in the chat. We also like to encourage early exposure to child's accessibility is very important, and it makes positive impact on a child's emotional development. And the child also needs positive self-image and identity to build strong emotional social skills. Communication is often the #1 requirement for developing strong social skills. And emphasizing ease of communication is a major predictor of self-esteem and social competence. Maybe some of you are still picking up ASL and learning ASL. Please keep going. Some students who potentially don't have strong communication skills value those who are learning ASL. It makes each child
Some children, they still value their family, even if the communication isn't there, because the family is showing that they love them and that they care for them. So really, communication is not the #1 factor that determines how SEL skills are developed, whether some parents still speak, some use ASL, but it's all about that conversation and encouraging that dialogue through whichever way is possible.
So I do have this quote from Vygotsky. It's language is best learned through positive social experience. And I know we're always reading books about SEL skills and SES skills and how we can manage conflict. And I know about those readings, but when it comes to actually putting those principles into practice, that's where SES skills can really impact the child and develop their social skills. Learning in a classroom and learning through peers are different levels of communication, but both are very important. Now we're going to go into social identity theory. This is personal identity, the characteristics that define a particular individual. We have social identity. Who is the person as identified in terms of one's membership in various social groups? Following this, we have the social identity theory, a conceptualization recognizing that the best way we perceive others and ourselves is based on our unique characteristics and our membership in various groups. So we have a need for self-esteem for who I am, what are my values, what are my dreams, and who I am. Do I feel included? And how does that increase my self-esteem? And these are all connected with SEL skills and personal identity. And
Really, one of the most important and basic human needs deal with that feeling of belongingness in a group, because it's very important to feel like you are part of something. And that really sums up social identity theory. And right, this point that just came up, identification with a group has been linked with an increased level of self-esteem and sense of positive in-group attitudes. And I want you to think about your child and think about CSD and perhaps other schools, and how your child, oh, not CSD, my apology, interpreter error, but about how your child feels at school. Do they feel like they belong? Are they alone in school? Are they always solitary? Do they have that group through which they feel that identity with? Like many students do have that group here at CSD.
We also have in our community, our deaf community, a lot of intersectionalities. Those who live on campus, those who do not. What intersectionalities really is about different identities. I myself am a deaf woman, but I never feel deaf because I have full access to language. Here I feel, here I am a woman, but out into in the world, I am deaf, a deaf woman, because there's no accessibility, everyone's speaking and I don't have access to that language. So intersectionalities do change in the area with race or culture or age. Identity is fluctuating.
Now, there are different stages of developing SEL skills and developing identity. Now, before I dive in, I want to emphasize the importance that we allow our child to make decisions for their own selves and to make decisions for their own identities, because typically we may label them, oh, you're hard of hearing, oh, you're deaf, and we should refrain from that. Let them make those decisions for themselves and how they identify. And I know that some children struggle with that because, especially during the young ages, because there may be some confusion. However, let's move on to identity comparison. That's when your child begins to realize the differences between them and others and compare themselves to others. And identity tolerance. It's all about them tolerating their identity, but not truly accepting it. And that is when identity acceptance comes in. When your child accepts, I am deaf. And from here comes identity pride. And this is gained through different experiences and through experiencing culture. Your child finds their identity and says, not only am I deaf, but I am proud of my deaf identity. And then we have identity synthesis, which is about your child being comfortable interacting with both hearing and deaf people. Because your deaf child can code switch. And what that means is that they change their presenting identity to match that in different situations, depending on who is around or what the situation entails. And really, that code switching itself is an SES skill, a social emotional learning skill. And there are so many different identities, as you saw in the previous slide dealing with intersectionality. So we want your child to be aware of all these identities. Now, here are 10 tips on how you can support SEL at home. First, be a good listener. It's easier said than done, right? Because of our busy life. I mean, you have to go home and then cook, and then you have to pick a different child up, and then it gets very, very complicated. But seriously, the best way to connect with your child and to build their SEL skill is to listen. And I forgot to mention earlier, but some students feel like we make the label for them, but we don't have to do that. We ask them, instead of labeling what they feel, we should ask, what are you feeling right now? Instead of saying, are you feeling sad? Open the conversation and say, what are you feeling? Perhaps, hey, I notice a change in your behavior. What is that about? That is how they can then feel empowered to label what they are feeling, their emotions, and develop strong emotional skills and strong emotional awareness. So definitely being a good listener is a salient tip for all of you out there. And second, we have create avenues for learning, because there's so many different avenues. And typically when children are very young, they start reading, and that's how they develop certain skills. However, we have life experiences as well, and socialization with peers and adults and families, and then that opens up a myriad of avenues for learning. Now, tip number 3 deals with being the model of the behavior you seek. Number 4 deals with nurturing your child's self-esteem. I know that there are so many different factors that impact your child's self-esteem. Therefore, it's important to, in a way, fill their self-esteem and nurture it. Tip number 5 deals with respect and embrace of differences. Perhaps showing your child, hey, look, there are different families in the world, and we have to respect them and learn from them and embrace them, because your child will also learn from those outside your family. So it's important to encourage this kind of perspective. Tip number 6 is take advantage of the support services out there. Perhaps your school district has resources or emotional services. Really, there's so much out there. So please take advantage of everything you have and utilize it. Tip number 7 deals with anticipate and preview of experiences. Like I mentioned before, perhaps you're going to visit a different family, perhaps you're going to take a trip, and there in between that is a trip, correct? So perhaps you can take that moment to explore what your child is thinking and explaining the process of what is happening. Perhaps you can take a stop and have them touch the landscape or wherever you are. Really, it's all about including them in the process. And tip number 8 is about reflection. It's so important to process our thoughts and our feelings and what we experience. It's important to self-analyze and think back to what we did the other day and what can we do different. And it's a process of patience, but it's very, very critical. Now, tip number 9 deals with self-talk. I know that many of us can get into our own heads, but it's important to encourage self-talk. Perhaps we feel frustrated and we need to take a break. Then maybe by showing that we're frustrated, but advocating for ourselves and taking a break shows our child that they can do so as well. And that can help them in the different situations they face in everyday life. For example, with food and gas prices going up, maybe you feel frustrated. So it's important to let them know how you're dealing with that and how you're navigating through this situation. So because you are the model and your child will reflect what you show them. Tip number 10 deals with building up your child, nurturing them, filling them with everything they need, providing endless support, and letting them know that they are capable of anything. Now, I know that many of you already know this, but time and time again, it's been proven that families greatly influence social emotional outcomes for deaf and hard of hearing children. And families can support social emotional health and thus influence future outcomes, including academic outcomes. So I want you to think about if your child possibly has strong SEL skills, and then in school, they feel frustrated, then having that strong SEL skills will allow them to have an open mind, a growth mindset, so that they feel like, okay, they can get through this and they will thrive. Now, my final takeaways and wrapping up this webinar and a few things that I want you to keep in the forefront of your mind is here, my favorite quote. Tell me, I forget. Show me, I remember. Involve me, I understand. Really, it's about involving your child. And through my years of experience working here, I've noticed that many hearing and deaf families are the same. They get caught up with life and they don't really include their child in the decision-making process. So it takes your child a little bit longer to develop those SEL skills. Therefore, it's incredibly important to involve your child in the decision-making process and also allow them to make decisions for themselves, because that will show them that they can and that they will. Really, SEL is so important for many, many different reasons, but it's important now because you need to think about the relationship that you have with your child, because the relationship you have with your child now will impact that relationship that you have in 20, 30 years when they have a family of their own, or when they start a new career, a new job, or move somewhere. And really, here at CSD, we have 12 years of our children living here. We have an ECE program, so they may start earlier, but really it's about 12 years. Therefore, I want you all to think, what happens after those 12 years? What will our relationship look like? Therefore, I really want to emphasize, include your child in everything you do. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Now I'd like to open up the chat for any questions. Now it's a Q&A session. So really, thank you so much for joining, and please do feel free to put in any questions in the chat. Somebody asked, this is a new character that we're testing. Where did I find SEL resources? Well, really, CSD here, California School for the Deaf Fremont, has so many resources. But you can also look up to Gallaudet University, Volume 2. They have a lot of children's books and a lot of great resources related to social emotional learning on their website. So once again, Gallaudet University. Somebody also asked, what kind of curriculum do we use? Really, I've noticed that there is not a lot of curriculums that fit our children's needs. Therefore, we're trying to learn and take from other curriculums available at other schools and developing our own, like the one that we have for social emotional learning here at CSD. Prior, I remember that we used character education for elementary school, that we had 3 habits: be productive, I'm blanking on the all of them. However, we did have 3 different characteristics that we taught our children. However, we're in the process of developing more. I see a question related to what kind of tools for emotional learning can we have at home? Really, It's all about showing them emotional vocabulary so that they themselves can identify their emotions better. For example, showing them the sign for mad, as well as the facial expressions for mad so they can identify when they are feeling mad. There's also disappointed or frustrated. It's important to teach them emotions because they need to know that there is a range of emotions that they can feel. And that there is a range within that range of the types of emotions. For example, you can feel a little bit angry, a little bit frustrated or peeved, or you can lash out. It's important to explain because once they understand that, then you can explain what you can do with those emotions and how we can cope within different situations or different conflicts that may arise. There's another question about what do you recommend for a child with autism to help make choices when given ample enough time to do so? Often I have really, I don't have a lot of experience working with children with autism. Therefore, I don't really have a lot of information to share. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you so much for understanding. I see no more questions. I'll wait a few more minutes in case something comes up. Oh, thank you so much, Glenda. And again, really, SEL is incidental learning. It happens everywhere, all the time, all day, every day. So really just keep it up, expose your child to different situations and they'll develop strong SEL skills. And again, thank you so much for joining. I hope that you all benefited and I hope that I provided some great information so that you can apply in your home with your family and child.